Well, Emil, thank you so much for jumping on and having a chat with me.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Maybe could you tell us a bit about maybe your journey so far and how you came to be known as the fitness doctor?
Yeah, so I started, at 14, my dad said to me, you should be a doctor. And I thought, yeah, why not? I was good at science, I was good at people, and I figured at that point I didn't even have to think about the rest of my life. It was just pass exams, pass interviews. That was it until retirement. Pension was sorted, and that seemed a great idea for a 14-year-old. I don't know why. So that was it. So I got into medical school, and then I missed all the gap years, just ploughed straight through. But then I've always been into sport and exercise, and through university I worked in a gym. I trained quite a lot. I competed as a strongman. I competed at rugby. I competed at mixed martial arts. And I actually did a intercalated degree in sports exercise science while I was in medical school. So I was sort of building up this fitness CV, but didn't really ever have a plan for it. And then I graduated as a doctor, started working straight away, and had sort of big ideas of being an anaesthetist. Did 4 years of training, really, really enjoyed it. And then it must have been 2015, early 2015, where I sort of almost took a step back from my life and realized I was no longer enjoying it. So at that point, something had to change.
Got it.
And then within 6 months, I was out.
Wow, quick decision. And just take us back to life before fitness. What was life like for you before fitness? Was there ever a life before fitness?
No, well, no, there wasn't. I was always active, and it's my parents who I, have to thank for that. We were always rollerblading or skiing or, playing outside or whatever. It was never, I played rugby. I grew up in Wales, so rugby was kind of the thing to do. So I did that since I was probably about 9 or 10. But it was always an underlying thing. But I've been through all the fad diets. I've been through all the same processes as everyone else. That go through the fitness world. And it's only in the last sort of 3 years where I've really become a fitness professional, as it were. And it's been a long and convoluted journey for sure. But there was a period when I was working as a doctor where that was my priority, and I was still training because I didn't know anything else. I was eating, but not particularly, not anything in particular, and I was just being a normal person, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. And you've had a pretty interesting past in terms of sport, because I found a video from 2008. How come you got involved in MMA?
So, yeah, if you Google me, that's the one that comes up.
Yeah.
So basically, this is a story in itself. I played rugby since I said 9 or 10, and I kept getting concussed. I kept hitting my head, and tearing my hamstring. So eventually I left, and I thought, what next? Let's go into a ring where someone's trying to kick your head off. So I did one fight. I won it, but I very quickly realized that was not a sensible option, trying to leave contact sport effectively. And then after that, I went into strongman. So that saw me bulking up to 142 kilos. I think that's about 315 pounds. That's big. And then after that, I was getting injured. I was morbidly obese. My BMI was 40.
Right.
And I was just unhealthy. I was 26 and I was struggling to walk up hills. So that's where the health part of it came in. So between concussions from rugby, torn hamstrings, injuries from strongman, and then, being morbidly obese, there was muscle there for sure, but I was fat as well. And I just thought, right, I need to focus on my health. I'm 26. I've still got age on my side, but by the time I hit 30, by the time I start to need to be thinking about these things, I want to have had a running start. So that's then where nutrition, health fundamentally came in. And you know what, as a doctor, we know nothing about lifestyle or nutrition or exercise. What we do as professionals is we put plasters, we put band-aids on problems that have spent years developing. And that was another big issue with me in medicine. And sorry if I'm jumping the interview process.
All good,
but,
all good, not at all.
This is again where I kind of realized that we weren't fixing things. We were just putting our fingers in leaks, putting our fingers in holes in buckets, instead of, taking the water out of the bucket effectively, and actually 80% maybe of all of medical problems are lifestyle related. And I thought, right, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna get to the source of all of this.
That's interesting because, I mean, obviously with the medical training, it's a lot of years and it's intense. And there's a lot to cover. I mean, I guess, you can't specialize in one thing. You can only really specialize in one thing. But when it comes to what you just said, 80% of most medical problems or thereabouts is lifestyle. So is it discussed at all through those years of training?
Yeah, it is. When someone gets a diagnosis of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, for example, or a heart attack, then we sort of say, yeah, you need to sort out your diet and lifestyle. You need to stop smoking. That's it. With mental health. Oh, you need to you need to start being more mindful. You need to start being more present. And that means nothing. The doctors don't know what it means. The patients don't know what it means. They might get a referral for, some professional help in 18 months' time, which, I mean, with varying success, but, there's no real commitment or dedication to it. You leave someone, with go sort out your lifestyle. They come back 12 weeks later and you start the medicines.
It does seem that there's I think, one of my previous guests, Dr. Shan Hussein, he came on and talked of that. I think 50%, I think they said 50% of patients that come in already know what they want. They already know what prescription they're after, generally. They're not looking for lifestyle advice anyway.
That's entirely, I mean, I'd agree with that. I don't know the numbers, but I see that a lot in A&E. People are coming in for a very specific thing, and they don't want to be told that, they can't have antibiotics or that antibiotics won't work. That they can't have a hospital bed. They don't need a hospital bed. I mean, A&E is slightly different, but even then, a lot of A&E is dealing with consequences, again, of lifestyle. Diabetes complications, heart attacks, strokes.
Addiction, alcohol.
Huge, yeah, absolutely huge. Drugs, alcohol, both the acute injuries and issues caused by those substances, but also the chronic long-term problems. And mental health is a huge chunk of our services, self-harm, suicide attempts, countless things.
Mm-hmm. And so you were in full-time medical work for some years. You, like you said, came out of that and went into emergency. So how do you balance your time between emergency and sort of pro fitness as well?
So with medical training, it's very much a conveyor belt, and not in a negative sense, just that's how it is. You kind of start at one end and you kind of trundle on through, and it's pretty full on. So I left that conveyor belt after 4 years of solid work. And at that point, I started doing flexible locum shifts. I was filling gaps in the rota. And unfortunately, with the state of the NHS at the moment in the UK, there is a lot of gaps in a lot of rotas. So there's as much work as anyone really wants, which in itself is an issue and, the subject of a whole other podcast. But, from my point of view, it certainly means that I've got, crazy flexibility in terms of what work I can do. And it basically means then that I can sort of work a certain number of shifts every month and have all of the rest of the time to pursue my fitness stuff, both for myself, which was a huge part of it, and then for, in terms of developing my knowledge and developing my service that I provide to my clients. Yeah,
great. And I like in your bio, I talked about the sort of the title that you gave with what you do, and you said you work as an accountability and personal optimization coach, which is a great way of saying, as you said, fitness and nutrition coach. It sounds more spicy. I like that. So the
sorry, go on.
The accountability part is what's that about? Can you explain a bit about the accountability?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge part of any process is accountability. And if you read sort of any sort of self-help habit book, it'll often say have an accountability partner, have a coach. And actually, I always say that the science of nutrition is really, really simple. I mean, certainly for fat loss, you need to eat a little bit less. I mean, that's it. Every diet, every book, every bit of magazine advice is eat a little bit less. They'll always quote some sort of magic potion, magic hormone, some nifty trick, some nifty rule. But you have to consider that all these diets work, each with another different magic rule. And actually, the only rule is eat in a calorie deficit. So, that's it. You can have that for free. The art of nutrition coaching is then the human factors, the incorporating it into the lifestyle and accountability. It's every week speaking to this person and saying, how has this week been? Have you managed to stay on track? And, all of these little times where they might think, oh, I don't know if I want to stay on track, I'll just have some cake or whatever. They think, right, I'm going to have a chat with my coach this weekend. So it might just give them that little bit of a push. But I mean, certainly the accountability and personal optimization coach it's just words. It means nothing. Nutrition coach fills the slot exactly the same. But because I kind of look at nutrition as such a simple thing, effectively, it's much more than that. And the personal optimization is not even in any sort of special way. It's just in terms of your lifestyle, what you do, I can optimize that. And it will be a different optimization to another person, even though you're the same human biologically, physiologically. The optimizations are different because they're based on your lifestyle. The science is super simple, but people are so unique in their behavior, habits, lifestyles, motivation, psychology, that is where the art comes into it.
Yeah, great. And picking up on the areas that people are already doing well in and just optimizing those and then bringing out those bad habits and debunking them and removing them. Yeah. Okay. Emil, I'm going to take you into the middle bits, which is a section of the show I'm just going to throw some questions at you. So the first question, well, first of all, are you ready for the middle bits?
Yeah, I did see the description in the document. I thought, ooh, here we go. Rapid fire, let's go.
Rapid fire. I've got a lot of surprises that I sort of changed the questions up just yesterday. So, if you've had any preparation, you may as well have screwed the paper up and throw it in the bin. There's nothing really too bad. Anyway, could you tell me your number one tip for a fulfilled life?
So I always say that my goal is to wake up in the morning excited for the day ahead and go to sleep at the end of the day content. And actually those two things are almost entirely independent of real, material things. And in fact, anything, those are just states of mind that you can build and train over time. So I think that is literally the most simple form of, a fulfilled life. And then you can talk endlessly about meaningful relationships, meaningful work, and all this other stuff. But if you boil it down to being excited about the day ahead and being content at the end of the day, then, that covers it very simply for me.
And the rest of it falls into place, really, if you are doing those two things.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, and the things that you're doing are therefore giving you reasons to have those two things. So it all kind of just works together. If you just pin on those two, then everything kind of comes together.
Mentors and coaches, as you just mentioned, are crucial in any endeavor, and that's definitely what I see. Whose work has influenced your work?
There's a lot of people. I take lots of little things from a lot of people, and it really depends on the area. I mean, people are experts in different fields, so I would never go to one person for everything. And certainly I've got sort of an inner circle of friends who are sort of my peers and they support me in that kind of way. And then I've got certain people who I talk to for business, certain people who I talk to for nutrition. So I don't think I would have a single mentor or person per se. It's sort of, I say by committee, by peers. and people around me. But it's fundamental to get a group of people. It doesn't have to be big, but a handful of people who you really, really trust around you, for sure.
Do you have a book that you have recently read, or a resource that's the last thing you looked at?
Yeah, so I mean, at the moment, I'm on fire in terms of all of that kind of stuff, to the point that someone actually messaged me on Instagram and said, "I've seen all the personal development work that you're doing. Are you okay? Has something serious happened in your life?" And I said, "No, I'm just really enjoying, all of this stuff." So, I mean, my resources at the moment are Audible. Audible is gold. I literally, every time I'm in the car and driving, I'm on Audible, and you can increase the speed that you listen to the books. So I'm up to 2.5 at the moment. So I'm hammering through them.
Wow, impressive! Yeah.
And another one I'm really enjoying actually is Blinkist. 15-minute summaries of books. Now, I would never say that that's enough. However, you can fire through a book a day. You've got no reason not to hit a book a day, and then you can decide which ones you want to listen to in full on Audible, or read in terms of paper. And some books, I get a few implementable points, and then that's it. I don't necessarily need to. Or if I've read a book, then I can go to Blinkist and just get a reminder, a summary. So those two at the moment are fire for me.
That's a good point, because so many times I've read a book and it's a good thick book, and then there's really only one point to it, and you take the point, the sort of first paragraph, and good. Not saying this is a bad book. This is a good book. I think it's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just about making a decision and make it firmly. I mean, that's the point of the book, and you can kind of get it really quickly. So I get that. That's Blinkist. I've written that down. That's a really good option. I've never heard of it. Or at least I've seen the name and I've never gone to it. If there was a word you could use to set your intention for the next 12 months, what word would that be?
For me, it's focus.
Yeah.
I struggle. It's not that I struggle. I like doing a lot of different things. I like spinning a lot of plates, and that's sort of my downfall. And if you ask any of my close friends, that when someone says, "What's Emil doing these days?" they can't explain, because it's just it's too many different things. And people ask me, "What do you actually do?" And I'm sort of like, well, a little bit of everything. So no, it's focus. And ultimately, I left medicine to run a fitness business, so I need to double down, triple down on that, remove distractions, and hammer it.
And the final question of the middle bits is the trickiest, I think. Are you a cat person or a dog person?
I'm a dog person through and through. I really, really want to get a dog, but I can barely look after myself at the moment in terms of where I am in the world, or sorting things out. I disappear at a moment's notice, so I wouldn't do that to a dog. But it'll be dog as soon as I settle.
Got it. That's it. You made it through. Yeah. Now, as we go into this sort of second half, I want to get into a bit of the nitty-gritty of making positive change. And you did. I read a blog of your. Excuse me. I read a blog of yours from last year, and you tried to get a different approach to your nutrition. So, what was it that made you go into veganism for 1 month in 2017?
So, yes, basically, with veganism, it's a very polar world. The vegans are very emotionally invested in it, and the rest of the world is therefore equal and opposite and very against it. There doesn't seem to be a middle ground. So I wanted to delve in and work out exactly what the fuss was about, because there were certain arguments which I found very, very convincing and sensible. And then there were certain things like the documentaries on Netflix, which were just ludicrous, just awful. And I just thought, right, there needs to be something here. So I thought, right, the only way to do it is to immerse myself in it and to do it properly and to work out exactly what the ins and the outs are. And part of that would be, going vegan, trying it out. Part of that was blood tests, which I did before and afterwards, and how I felt during the process. But part of it was also I made myself watch the documentaries. I read the books. So I really immersed myself in. I ate out in vegan restaurants. And some of the things that I wanted to prove were, not prove, but, people say that vegans can't eat enough protein to build muscle. So I wanted to see if that was true, whether it was possible, how feasible it was for someone like me who's a meat eater through and through. And also, the variety of food. And then the last one was whether it was any healthier, because that's the big one. People go vegan for health. And in short, to conclude, veganism, you can have unhealthy vegans, you can have healthy vegans, you can have unhealthy meat eaters, you can have healthy meat eaters. I think at this point in time, to be optimal now as a human is probably 80 or 90% plant-based with 10, 20% animal products, lean, healthy animal products. And that's my guess. It boils down to what my mum always said was eat more vegetables,
Yeah. Do you? So, what was the experience like? Did you find that you felt healthier or cleaner or lighter? How did it feel through that 30 days?
It was hugely interesting. I learned a hell of a lot, and I would recommend it to people to do for sure. The thing is, I'm reasonably healthy. It's my job to be reasonably healthy. My blood tests before were reasonably healthy. My blood tests after were equally reasonably healthy. There were a few minor changes of sort of query significance, but so during the time I tried to eat this similar macronutrient split just to sort of match it. And you could eat enough protein. That was absolutely fine. I found I was a little bit more sore after workouts, totally anecdotal, potentially due to less amino acids variety. I found I had more energy, again, potentially because I was eating more carbohydrates. But, I would never put anything down to hard and fast fact. I think it's great for all of us to eat less animal products. I think from an ethical, environmental argument, then veganism is, I don't think there's an argument there per se. I think it's definitely better for the world and for animals, not to eat them. But, from a health point of view, I don't think you need to. This is it. You hear these stories. I used to eat loads of junk food and then I went vegan and I was all of a sudden healthy. And it's like, well,
changed. Yeah.
Yeah, you could have just stopped the junk food,
Absolutely, yeah. It's a good one as well to try it. I think, and I think as you said in one of your blogs, it's actually quite difficult to change to veganism. It's very difficult because one, it's access to the foods themselves, but also the discipline to stick to it and the variety of cooking. We do have vegan friends, and some of them don't eat that well. They just don't. And it's because I think partly motivation, but also they've chosen this lifestyle, but they haven't followed through with learning enough about it before they jump into it.
So I'd say that's a very, very interesting point, is a lot of people get into it for the wrong reasons, perhaps. They get into it for health reasons, but actually they haven't done any research about it. And I would say if you're trying to lose body fat, then lose the body fat first, then start moving towards veganism, because as you say, it's just a lot more difficult to do. And actually, if you're not truly into it, then you would just end up eating the same vegan ready meals that, you're not preparing vegetables, you're not preparing beans, you're not preparing, tofu, all these real foods. And certainly I found when I ate out as a vegan, the food was amazing. It was incredible. There's no issue there, but it obviously requires a lot more effort. And there's just a lot of things which you just sort of you just can't eat because they contain traces of animal products, which, they're not meat, they're not dairy, they're not traditional animal products, but they just have some anchovies in them, or they have some essence, some gelatin, capsules in supplements will have beef products in them. So it's severely limiting. Vegan is very, very limiting.
Plus medication, as you mentioned before in your blog there, medication is tested on animals. So.
Tested on animals. So, technically that's an animal product, but so vegans, that they do allow themselves to use medications, but I'm sure there's vegans out there who, go the whole hog. I think veganism is a spectrum. Some people will still use leather. Some people will go kind of plant-based. And, there's different and raw veganism. There's all sorts of extremes. And I think as humans, going more plant-based is probably good for both us and the environment, but I don't think we need to go all the way unless it's for animal welfare. In that case, do your research and crack on.
Generally, we don't have our heads in the sand anymore these days, and people do know what's good and what's bad to put it in their bodies. So, in your opinion, what's stopping the huge percentage of the population from actually doing that and putting the good stuff in their bodies? Not just talking about vegetables now. I'm just talking about general diet, nutrition. What's stopping people doing it?
A combination of modern lifestyle, which is crazy busy, crazy stressful, and people just aren't equipped for it.
Yeah.
Which then makes people more likely to make poor food choices. And then that coupled with the ridiculous availability of those poor food choices, which are heavily, heavily marketed. Now, I'm not the kind of person who takes the blame away from individuals. So people say, oh, the market, it's the fault of the marketing. It's the fault of fast food. It's not. They're trying to sell their stuff. That's how the world works. It's the responsibility of the individual to not eat it or to moderate their intake. But I can appreciate that in the modern world of lack of sleep, high stress, a million and one things going on, that it slips in, and those are the reasons why people might struggle. It's hard. It is hard.
And hammered with marketing to the point where that's the first thing that comes to mind when you think, oh, I'm hungry. There it is, the golden arches or whatever. I see personally, my wife's a dietitian, and she lets me know that quite often. But it's fantastic because it keeps me on track, because I do slip into the unhealthy foods. I see the big three culprits for me in terms of poor lifestyle and nutrition is alcohol, sugar, and that disproportionate amount of carbs. The bad carbs. And we know that the effects of sugar, the effects it has on the brain, and how addictive it can be. So, how do you help somebody? How would you help a client overcome food addiction or addiction to sugar?
So, I mean, that's an interesting one actually, because I'm very much an advocate of everything in moderation. So, I'm very much against bad and good foods. Which is kind of against the whole junk food thing. Now, for me, junk food is basically food which has a very high calorie to nutrition ratio, or low nutrition to calorie ratio. So it's not got much nutrition and a lot of calories. Now, out of the context of the rest of the diet, you can't label it a bad food. For example, if you're eating enough protein, enough vegetables, all of your micronutrients, and you have a little bit of chocolate, then in the context of your diet, that chocolate gives you joy, it gives you happiness, you're covering all the bases. That is a very perfectly balanced diet, and chocolate is a good food in that context. If you're eating 80% chocolate, then it's a bad food. So for me, I try and, it's a no bullshit approach in terms of, I'm not going to apply these imaginary rules. I'm going to say, look, this is chocolate. It has a lot of fat, a lot of sugar. It doesn't have much other nutrition. So if you eat it, then you're not going to have much space in your diet for other food. Like, if you have issues with chocolate, as in once you start, you can't stop, then there's various things that we can do to work around that. But fundamentally, it's not a bad food. It's just that you have a psychological attachment to it, or it's a trigger food for you. So, the only foods that people should really truly avoid are trigger foods, and trigger foods are usually very specific. It's one brand of chocolate, of a specific white chocolate or something. And in that case, you can try a different chocolate, which will sate the craving without you triggering. So I'm quite sort of balanced in that regard in terms of things like, as you say, I mean, alcohol is slightly different, but even alcohol in moderation isn't in itself an issue. Certainly you can enjoy a glass of wine a couple of times a week. And actually, when it comes to dieting and nutrition, adherence is number one. If someone can't stick to something, then there's no point. So to say to someone, you can't eat sugar, you can't eat bad carbs, you can't have alcohol, there's no point. So put it this way, if someone's eating or drinking 3 bottles of wine and 10 donuts every day, and I can get them down to 2 bottles of wine and 10 donuts, then we're making progress. That's an improvement. And for the first week, we can go with that.
Yeah.
The second week, then we'll try and replace a donut with, a bit of broccoli. And it's an individual thing. Exactly, dip it into. But for an individual, it's a case of what they're going to stick to on this day in their current circumstances, and what you can kind of negotiate and haggle. There's no point in saying, look, this is your meal plan, you have to follow it, because they won't.
No.
So you kind of, and I think actually in the live I did with Stephen, my point was, don't even attempt optimal. Forget about optimal. Forget about perfect. You don't need perfect. You just need the sort of the 80. You need to hit the 20% to get you 80% of the results. Do that most of the time, and actually in the real world, you're done.
For anyone listening, could you just break down micronutrients if they don't know what that might look like for them in a real world sort of thing?
Yeah, no, of course. So micronutrients would be vitamins and minerals. So generally speaking, fruits, vegetables, foods like that will be rich in micronutrients. What you would traditionally find in a multivitamin pill, that kind of thing. Vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin D, iron, magnesium, zinc, all of these sort of things, just a bunch together in the sort of the term micronutrients, as opposed to macronutrients, which covers carbs, fats, protein.
Got it. So what about after the diets? So how do people stay on track and not crash or fall back off the wagon and that kind of thing after they've completed a diet plan?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting one, because a lot of, certainly the media and also coaches, will focus on the transformation. They'll focus on the big fat loss drive, which, the client's hugely motivated. They're losing fat. They're looking better every week. They're usually employing some sort of dietary tactics, whether it's a meal plan, whether it's tracking their intake, whether it's eating the same food or cutting out carbs or whatever, which is usually not sustainable, but they achieve their goal. And then the diet stops. The coach is like, job done. The client has their wedding or goes to Ibiza or whatever else. And then they're lost. They're like, well, my previous diet rules don't work anymore. So I don't know what to do. And then they rebound and they get even worse. And this is where yo-yo diet culture comes from. And this is where I'm super passionate about, because that's not the end. So my clients tend to stay with me for years. We get them down to their ideal body composition. Then we coach them back up. They get fatter, usually a little bit. And they balance out their diet. Their calories go up a bit, but they're building habits which they can maintain. And this is why it's so important not to have bad foods, because if someone says to me, I'll never eat chocolate again in my life, I just don't believe them. So by saying chocolate's bad, chocolate's bad, chocolate's bad, it's not doing them any favors whatsoever. So it's like, right, chocolate's fine, but you can't have that much of it. Try and, let's get by with a little bit. And so my end goal for clients is to have a healthy body composition that doesn't require willpower, that doesn't require any sort of arbitrary rules, tracking of intake, nothing. They're just every day to day eating what they want, as much as they want, while being healthy and maintaining their body composition. Now that will take years of coaching, but I truly, truly believe it's possible. And it requires, it requires some sort of training and expectation management, but I truly, truly believe it's possible.
That's why people like yourself are around to help with that. And what's your opinion on willpower? Is fitness and good nutrition just about willpower?
I think it shouldn't be about willpower in the slightest. Yeah. I think you shouldn't be looking at cake and having a fight every time you see cake. It should be a conscious choice whether you want it or not. And sometimes you'll say, I want it, and then you have it. And sometimes you say, no, I'm fine. But that it has to be a conscious choice. Same with exercise. I mean, there's always going to be some element of willpower at some point in the process. And certainly if you're very overweight or have never trained, there's going to be some sort of pushing the equilibrium to start with. But the end goal is always going to be, absolutely, cruising nice and easy, no willpower. But that's the long-term goal. Now that really is a long-term goal.
That's living and breathing the lifestyle that you wanted. in the first place, isn't it? That's just, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and I make my decisions every day, rather than having that psychological fight every time you want to, or feel like you want to have something that's not good for you. Okay, so I think it's safe to say most people, if they're living an unhealthy, or maybe they're living with an unhealthy nutrition plan, or they're not on a plan or anything, they're just living unhealthily, they know they want to change. They probably want to change. They know they need to change, yet they're not. And it's usually down to motivation. So where do you start with that, with motivation, with your clients?
With my clients, I'm lucky because by the time they've found me, by the time they've approached me, they're motivated. You know, the thing is, I don't hard sell. I don't go chasing people down. There's no point. People come to me when they're ready to change, when they really want to change. And actually, they've done most of the hard work there and then. If people are, you know, as you describe people who are out and about, if they're thinking that they want to change, then there is a level of motivation there, you know, straight away. Where to start, then that's a minefield. You know, the world and the internet are full of a million conflicting theories and advice. So it's difficult, and it's going to be a long old road. But what I would say is just start with, you know, don't overcomplicate it. Start with super little things. And as much as you want to do that 6 week, that 8 week, that, you know, super low calorie, 7 day a week gym diet, whatever, try and resist. Or if you want to do that, build the habits as well. It's going to be the habits which are going to maintain it. You know, people say after I finish dieting, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. The diet never finishes. The key is to make it so that it doesn't feel like a diet. So pick little things. I mean, there's 4 pillars. There's nutrition, there's movement, there's mindfulness, and there's sleep. And ultimately you need to work on all 4, but people will start with nutrition and movement. And I call it movement because exercise is gym, exercise is running. Neither of those are necessary. Movement can be literally anything. It can be walking to places. It can be, I mean, I've got a stand-up desk. It can be standing for a few hours every day. It can be, you know, anything that you didn't do before that you can implement to start doing. And that's anything that raises the heart rate or moves the joints. So even sitting on the floor and stretching, or doing some squats while your kettle's boiling, you know, little things like this. And the key is that you'll implement changes, you'll lose it, then you just need to pick it up again and keep going. You know, it's going to be back and forth. It's going to be all over the place, but just, you can't fail if you never give up. You know, you just need to keep going. And same with nutrition. It's just like, people say it's so confusing, and it is for sure. But, you know, going into a coffee shop and buying a croissant and a massive latte with cream on top is quite obviously not optimal. You don't know why, you don't know the details, you don't know what's causing it, but it's quite obvious. You know, just making small changes. And I mean, one simple change, don't change anything else. Just try and have 2 or 3 different vegetables with each meal. You know, don't even change what the meal is. If you're going to be having a ready meal lasagna, just add 3 vegetables to it. And that in itself will start to, you'll feel fuller earlier. You'll eat perhaps less of the lasagna. You might not want the mid-afternoon chocolate bar. So you're not even eating less food, you're eating more food, but you're suddenly thinking about what you're eating. You're suddenly, you know, more aware of yourself, and then you can start to, you know, put everything else around that. You know, once you start, then everything snowballs, but it's going to be a long road.
Yep, that's great. Thank you. Now, those 4, I'll repeat those 4 after this show and just make sure that we hammer it home. I do hammer it home in terms, when you talk about movement, I say to my clients, I'm a remedial massage therapist, and I spend a lot of time one-on-one with clients that generally have poor posture, because most people do, because we're all on our phones, we're all at our desks, we're all hunched down. So we spend a lot of time with posture, and I say, even just think about what you're doing when you're picking up the kettle, what you're doing when you're turning on the tap. It's all using muscle to do that. So you're using a muscle. Think about how you're using it. Where's your hips? How are you standing? How are you leaning forward? Small, subtle things that you can change very, very quickly that can have profound effects. And most of the clients I have who come in, say, with headaches, for example, it's down to the position they're in, and they just need to make small change. You know, stand-up desk is a great one as well. We have one, and that's made a huge difference to us to be standing even 20%, 30% of the day makes a difference. You've given us some gold, Emil. Thank you so much. There's so much we could take away, and I think there's a lot more that we could go on as well and talk about. I do appreciate that you've given us just a taste, no pun intended, of the changes people can make. So I do appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on the show.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And as you say, I could talk about this stuff forever. Usually it's someone having to stop me. But no, it's been absolutely awesome. Thank you so much.
So what's coming up for you next, and how maybe can our listeners get a hold of you if they are looking for a coach? I'm sure you coach online all around the world, right?
Yeah. So I have clients all around the world. The best place to catch me at the moment is Project Goliath on Instagram.
Okay.
But I live in Bristol. I've just travelled across to Norwich to meet a colleague, a fitness professional, and we're looking at setting up something a little bit more where we can help more people, basically. So watch this space over the next couple of weeks. There's two of us. We can coach maybe 10 people each, so we can't help that many people. But together with this sort of scalability plan, we're looking to be able to provide information to a much, much bigger number of people, basically.
Great. So what's coming up for you? Where do you see things happening in the next 12 months? Is that what you're talking about, scalability?
Yeah, it's scalability. I mean, I love coaching. Coaching will always be the core of my practice. Overall, it's going to be stepping away more from medicine. Not because I don't love it, but because I have other things that I want to do more. And I'm very much about, I want to do what I enjoy. I want to aim for ideal. I want to aim for optimal. So I want to move away from medicine. I want to do more coaching, more traveling around to clients, around to events, learning more. Personal development, as I said, is a huge part of what I want to do. Rebalance my life in that regard. So over the next 12 months, I'm aiming to be entirely out of medical practice and entirely into coaching with this scalability plan, just trying to get more information out to more people.
Fabulous. So I'll make sure that there's links in our show notes. So for anyone listening, if you want to find Emil, find Project Goliath on Instagram, go to the show notes, themanbits.com/podcast. It's all in there, and we'll make sure you can get access to those. Emil, thank you. It's been my great pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much.